Documented patrol logs. Authentic visual evidence. Absolute truth. This is bodycam incident reports.
Get on the ground, now.
I can't. This is a medical cane. I'm disabled.
You're swaying. You're suspicious. Hands where I can see them.
My hands are visible. I'm waiting for my wife. I've committed no crime.
Failure to comply is an arrest.
Officer, you're making a serious mistake. Step back.
Turn around, now.
Officer Derek Evans, 29 years old and seemingly bored until this very moment, had his hand hovering aggressively over his holster. He wasn't drawing the weapon yet, but his posture screamed that he wanted to. He was responding to a silent alarm in his own head, a bias programmed deep within the circuitry of his 8-year career. He saw a black man in a green army surplus jacket standing still, and in his mind that translated to a threat. Marcus Thorne, 62 years old, didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands in panic, and he didn't drop to his knees. He simply shifted his weight, wincing slightly as the pressure moved from his prosthetic left leg to his good right leg. He planted the cane more firmly on the concrete sidewalk. Marcus was a retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major. He had seen things in the sandstorms of Iraq and the jungles of older forgotten conflicts that would make Officer Evans soil his uniform. He wasn't afraid of a 20-something with a badge. He was disappointed. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that carried the weight of decades of command. "I suggest you take a breath and look closer. This is a walking cane, and I am waiting for my wife to pick up her heart medication." "I said get on the ground," Evans barked, taking a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "You're loitering. You're swaying. You look intoxicated and you're acting belligerent. I've been watching you for 5 minutes. You're casing the entrance." "I am leaning." Marcus corrected his eyes, locking onto Evans's sunglasses. "Because I left my leg in a province you couldn't find on a map, and I am not loitering. I am a customer waiting for a ride. Now, unless you have an articulable, reasonable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime, you are currently harassing a private citizen." Evans blinked. He hadn't expected legal terminology. He expected fear. He expected compliance. Or better yet, he expected a reason to escalate. "I need to see your ID, now." "No," Marcus said simply. The air between them seemed to vibrate with tension. Shoppers pushing carts full of detergent and soda paused in the parking lot. A woman loading her trunk 3 cars away stopped and looked over. "Failure to identify is a crime," Evans lied, his voice rising an octave. He was losing control of the narrative, and he knew it. "You are refusing a lawful order. It is only a lawful order if I am under arrest or valid detention." Marcus said, his hands resting clearly on the head of his cane, nowhere near his pockets. "Am I under arrest, officer?" "Evans?" He read the name tag with deliberate slowness. "You're detained for suspicious activity." Evans stepped in closer, his chest almost bumping Marcus. "And public intoxication." "I haven't had a drink in 22 years, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "And my swaying is a balance issue due to a service-connected disability. You are making a mistake, son. A very expensive mistake. I am asking you nicely to step back and let me wait for my wife." Evans felt the eyes of the parking lot on him. His ego was bruised. A suspect was talking down to him, correcting him, dismissing him. He couldn't let that stand. Not here. Not in his town. "I'm not asking any more," Evans sneered, snapping the retention strap on his holster. The moment Officer Evans unsnapped his holster, the atmosphere in the parking lot shifted from curiosity to dread. You could feel it. That sharp intake of breath that happens right before a car crash. Marcus Thorne didn't move, but his eyes narrowed. He calculated the distance, the officer's stance, the lack of cover. Old instincts flared, assess, adapt, overcome, but he suppressed them. He knew that any sudden movement, even a defensive one, would be used to justify his death in a police report. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice steady as a rock. Look around you. You have an audience. You are about to violate a citizen's civil rights on camera. About 20 feet away, near a silver sedan, a woman named Brenda had pulled out her smartphone. Brenda was 54, a school librarian with a keen sense of right and wrong. She held the phone horizontally, steadying her elbows against her ribs, capturing every pixel of the confrontation. He's got a cane, not a gun, Brenda shouted out. Why are you threatening him? Evans whipped his head around his face, flushing a mottled red. Back up. You need to back up. This is an active investigation. I am on public property, Brenda shot back, her voice shaking but defiant. I am recording for his safety and mine. I'm not interfering. Evans turned his attention back to Marcus, his frustration boiling over. The suspect was too calm. Silence can be louder than screaming, and Marcus's silence was deafening. It was the silence of a man who knows exactly who he is. Evans interpreted this stoicism as arrogance. He interpreted the knowledge of the law as a threat. Turn around, Evans commanded, reaching for his taser instead of his firearm, perhaps sensing that shooting an old man in broad daylight would be too hard to explain, but electrocuting him felt like an option. Put your hands on the wall. I cannot easily turn around without my cane, Marcus explained, enunciating every word for the benefit of Brenda's recording. And I have committed no crime. Terry versus Ohio requires you to have specific articulable facts that crime is afoot. You have none. You have a bias and a badge. Tell me, officer, what is your reasonable suspicion, specifically? You fit the description of a suspect. Evans grasped at straws, inventing a phantom call. We had a report of a man harassing customers. Which customer? Marcus asked. The ones walking by who haven't looked at me twice, or the ones currently watching you harass a senior citizen? That's it, Evans growled. He felt small. He felt powerless in the face of this man's absolute dignity. And for a man like Derek Evans, feeling powerless was the ultimate trigger. He needed to assert physical dominance to regain psychological control. He needed to see Marcus afraid. He needed to see him on the ground. Evans holstered the taser and lunged forward. He didn't go for Marcus's arms. He went for the one thing keeping Marcus upright. You want to play lawyer? Evans yelled. Play lawyer in the cell. Don't do it. Marcus warned, his voice low. Don't touch me, son. But Evans was past the point of listening. He saw the recording phone, he saw the watching crowd, and he saw the unyielding black man in front of him. He made a choice that would ripple through the entire city. He reached out with his boot and hooked it around the bottom of Marcus's aluminum cane. The sound of the aluminum cane clattering against the pavement was sickeningly loud. It was a sharp, metallic clack skitter that echoed off the brick facade of the CVS. Without his support, Marcus Thorne's body betrayed him. His prosthetic leg, a sophisticated piece of carbon fiber and titanium that usually allowed him to walk with dignity, buckled under the sudden shift in gravity. Marcus didn't scream. He didn't flail. He grunted a short, sharp expulsion of air as his shoulder slammed into the rough brick wall. He managed to catch himself with one hand before his face hit the masonry, but the image was brutal, an elderly man, a veteran, kicked like a stray dog by a public servant. Stop resisting! Evans screamed, the universal cry of an officer trying to justify excessive force for the cameras. He jammed his knee into the back of Marcus's good leg, forcing the old Marine down toward the pavement. I am not resisting, Marcus gritted out through clenched teeth. Pain shot through his lower back and his stump of phantom fire from an injury sustained 30 years ago in the desert. He allowed himself to be pushed down, knowing that fighting back would be a death sentence. He went to his knees, then to his stomach, the cold concrete pressing against his cheek. Get your hands behind your back. Evans was panting now, the adrenaline of violence coursing through him. He wrenched Marcus's left arm back with enough force to strain the rotator cuff. Easy, Marcus whispered. My shoulder. Shrapnel injury. It doesn't rotate that way. Stop fighting me. Evans ignored him, cranking the arm higher until the joint popped audibly. He slapped the cuffs on the metal, biting into Marcus's wrists. From the parking lot, the crowd was no longer silent. "He wasn't doing anything," Brenda yelled, stepping closer, her camera still rolling. "You kicked his cane. I saw you kick his cane. That is assault." "Back up or you're next," Evans threatened Brenda, pointing a finger at her while keeping his weight on Marcus's back. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I have one in custody. Resisting disorderly conduct. Send transport." Marcus lay on the ground, the grit of the sidewalk digging into his skin. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He had been a prisoner of war for 3 days in 1991. He had endured interrogation. He had endured torture. He could endure Derek Evans. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice muffled by the concrete but perfectly audible to the body camera on Evans's chest. "You have just made the last arrest of your career. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember how good it felt to kick a disabled man, because it's going to cost you everything." "Shut up," Evans hissed. He hauled Marcus up by the handcuffs, forcing the older man to hop awkwardly on his good leg. Marcus couldn't retrieve his cane. It lay on the ground a few feet away, abandoned. "My medication," Marcus said as Evans dragged him toward the patrol car. "And my wife is inside." "They can pick it up at the impound," Evans sneered. He shoved Marcus into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving. Marcus had to maneuver his stiff prosthetic leg, manually grabbing his pant leg to pull it inside before Evans slammed the door. Through the window, Marcus watched his cane lying on the sidewalk. He saw Brenda still filming, tears streaming down her face now. He saw his wife Sarah walking out of the pharmacy doors, looking around in confusion, searching for him. He tried to bang on the window, but Evans was already in the front seat, revving the engine. Evans peeled out of the parking lot, leaving the cane, the wife, and the truth behind him. Or so he thought. The drive to the precinct was only 15 minutes, but inside the patrol car, the silence was heavy enough to crush a man. Officer Evans kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the suspect thrashing or shouting obscenities. That's what he was used to. That's what he needed to validate the narrative he was already constructing in his head. But Marcus Thorne sat perfectly still. He sat with the posture of a man attending a formal briefing, despite his hands being cuffed behind his back and his leg throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache. He stared at the back of Evans's head, memorizing details. The haircut slightly out of regulation length. The badge number reflected in the partition glass. The way Evans's eyes darted nervously to the dashboard computer as he typed in preliminary notes. Male black, approximately 60s. Belligerent. Refused lawful order. Suspected intoxication. Resisted arrest. Evans was typing fiction. Marcus was composing a legal strategy. They arrived at the precinct, a sterile brick building that smelled of floor wax and old coffee. Evans pulled into the Sallyport, the garage door rumbling shut behind them, sealing them in. He hauled Marcus out of the car. Without his cane, Marcus had to lean heavily on the car door to stabilize himself. "Move," Evans said, grabbing Marcus's bicep. "I need support to walk," Marcus said calmly. "You left my medical device at the scene. You walked fine when you were drunk in the parking lot." Evans scoffed, dragging him toward the booking area. Marcus hopped and limped, gritting his teeth, refusing to give Evans the satisfaction of a groan. They pushed through the heavy double doors into the processing area. The room was bright, fluorescent, and busy. Phones were ringing. Officers were chatting. At the high, elevated desk sat Sergeant Paul Russo. Russo was 58 years old, a man carved out of granite and cigarette smoke. He had started on the force in the late 80s. He had served in Desert Storm before that. He had eyes that had seen every lie a criminal could tell and every mistake a rookie could make. He looked up over his reading glasses as Evans half-dragged, half-carried Marcus to the bench. "What do we have here, Evans?" Russo asked, his voice sounding like tires on gravel. Disorderly resisting public intox. Evans announced loudly, puffing his chest out. Guy was harassing customers at the CVS on 4th. Refused ID, tried to fight me when I detained him. Russo looked at Marcus. He looked at the gray hair, the calm face, the quality of the jacket. He looked closer. He saw the ring on Marcus's left hand, a heavy gold signet ring with a red stone. Russo knew that ring. He had seen it on men he respected more than anyone else on earth. "Uncuff him so we can print him," Russo said, his eyes narrowing. "He's combatant," Sarge Evans argued. "He's 60 years old and he's leaning on the counter because you didn't bring his cane," Russo snapped. "Uncuff him. Now." Evans rolled his eyes but complied. The moment the cuffs clicked open, Marcus rubbed his wrists. He didn't rub them fast. He massaged the circulation back with slow, deliberate movements. He stood as straight as his missing leg would allow and looked Sergeant Russo in the eye. "Sergeant." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Sir." Russo nodded back, an automatic reflex he couldn't quite explain yet. "Place your personal effects on the counter, please." Marcus reached into his pocket. He pulled out a slim leather wallet. He pulled out a set of keys. He pulled out a folded handkerchief. "Is that it?" Russo asked. "My cane is at the scene," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the noise of the room. "Officer Evans kicked it out from under me before tackling me." The room went quiet. Evans laughed nervously. "That's a lie." He tripped. Russo didn't look at Evans. He reached for the wallet. "Let's see who we have here." Sergeant Russo opened the leather wallet. It was warm from Marcus's pocket. The leather was old, but well cared for, conditioned, and stitched by hand. Russo flipped it open to the ID window. The first thing he saw was a standard state driver's license. Marcus Aurelius Thorne. D.O.B. 1962. Russo slid the license out. Behind it was another card. A white card with a blue strip. A Department of Defense retired identification card. Rank E9. Sergeant Major. Russo's eyebrows shot up. An E9 was a god in the enlisted world. You didn't get to be a sergeant major by being sloppy, and you certainly didn't get there by being a drunk loiterer. But it was the folded laminated card tucked in the billfold section that stopped Russo's heart for a beat. It was a miniaturized copy of a citation. Sometimes old vets carried them not out of vanity, but out of a need to remember why they hurt when it rained. The citation was for the Navy Cross, and below it a Purple Heart, for extraordinary heroism while serving with the 1st Marine Division, repelled enemy ambush, severe injuries sustained, saved the lives of 6 Marines. Russo read the words. He looked at the intoxicated man standing before him. He looked at the belligerent suspect. He saw the prosthetic legs outline against the jeans. Russo slowly closed the wallet. He placed it gently on the counter, treating it like a holy relic. He took a slow breath and looked at Officer Evans. The look was not one of a supervisor to a subordinate. It was the look of a man looking at something disgusting on the bottom of his shoe. "Evans," Russo said softly. The quietness of his voice was terrifying. "Yeah, Sarge. Let's get him booked. I got reports to write," Evans said, oblivious, still riding his adrenaline high. "Do you know who this man is?" Russo asked. "Yeah, Marcus Thorne, some drunk." Evans shrugged. "This man," Russo tapped the wallet with a thick finger, "is a retired sergeant major in the United States Marine Corps. He is a recipient of the Navy Cross. That is one step below the Medal of Honor, you idiot. And he has a prosthetic leg because he left the real one in a war zone." Evans blinked. The color began to drain from his face. He didn't tell me that." "He didn't have to," Russo roared, standing up. The chair flew back and hit the wall. The entire booking room froze. "He told you he was disabled. He told you he was waiting for his wife, and you brought him in for loitering. He refused ID. He was resisting." Evans stammered, stepping back. "Resisting." Russo grabbed the arrest report Evans had started. You kicked a disabled combat veteran's cane out from under him. Is that what resisting looks like to you? I thought he was reaching for a weapon. Marcus spoke then. I was standing at the position of parade rest, Sergeant. My hands were visible the entire time. Russo looked at Marcus. Sergeant Major, I apologize. I apologize on behalf of this department, and I apologize as a fellow service member. I don't want an apology, Sergeant, Marcus said clearly. I want the captain, and I want the body camera footage secured before this officer has a chance to accidentally delete it. Russo didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone on his desk. He didn't dial the watch commander. He didn't dial the lieutenant. He dialed the direct line to the precinct captain's office upstairs. Captain Miller, Russo said into the receiver, his eyes never leaving Evans. You need to come down to booking, right now. We have a situation. A code red situation involving Officer Evans and a highly decorated federal veteran. Yes, sir. I'll wait. Russo hung up. He looked at Evans. Put your badge and your gun on the counter, Evans. What? You can't do that, Evans protested. I said put them on the counter, Russo barked. You are relieved of duty until the captain gets here. You stepped in it, son. You stepped in it deep. Captain Miller was a man who moved with efficiency. He was 50 years old, trim, with graying temples and the weary eyes of someone who spent more time managing politics than policing. He had served as an MP in the Army during the late 90s and had a deep abiding respect for the chain of command. When he burst through the double doors of the processing area, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Report, Miller snapped, looking between Russo, Evans, and Marcus. Sergeant Russo stepped out from behind the desk, holding Marcus's wallet like evidence in a murder trial. Captain, Officer Evans arrested this gentleman, Mr. Marcus Thorne, outside the CVS on 4th Street. Charges were loitering and public intoxication. Mr. Thorne is a retired E-9 Navy Cross recipient and an amputee. Evans admits to kicking his cane away to effect the arrest. Captain Miller stopped. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the way Marcus stood painfully straight, favoring his right leg, sweat beading on his forehead from the exertion of standing without his cane. Miller recognized the bearing. You can't fake that kind of discipline. Take the cuffs off, Miller said. They are off, sir, Russo said. Miller walked over to Marcus. He didn't extend a hand, not yet. He looked him in the eye. I'm so hot here. My rotator cuff is likely torn. My wrists are lacerated, and my dignity has been assaulted. Miller turned slowly to Officer Evans. Evans was leaning against the filing cabinet, looking like a child who had broken a vase. Did you kick his cane? Miller asked. He was using it as a weapon. Potentially, Evans lied. He was waving it around. I have a witness video, Marcus interjected calmly. A woman named Brenda. She was recording from 20 feet away. She clearly captured me standing still. And she clearly captured Officer Evans kicking the cane. I suspect your body camera will corroborate that, provided it hasn't malfunctioned. Miller turned back to Evans. Gun, badge, now. Captain, come on, I was just following protocol. You profiled a disabled man. Miller cut him off, his voice low and lethal. You escalated a non-event into a civil rights violation. You are done for the day. Go to the locker room, change, and sit in the conference room. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your phone. Evans placed his gun belt and badge on the counter with a loud clatter. He glared at Marcus with pure hate, but Marcus didn't even look at him. Marcus was looking at the captain. I want copies, Marcus said. I want the arrest report. I want the booking sheet. And I want a preservation order for all digital evidence signed by you, Captain, right now. Mr. Thorne, we can handle this internally. Miller started, his tone shifting to damage control. We can get you medical attention, get you a ride home. I am not going home until I have the paperwork, Marcus said. I know how this works. Things get lost. Files get corrupted. I want the paper trail established now, before I leave this building. Miller sighed. He knew when he was beaten. He nodded to Russo. Print it. Everything. Give him the preservation order. And my wife, Marcus added. She is currently at the CVS, likely terrified. I need a patrol car driven by a supervisor to go pick her up and bring her here, and I need someone to retrieve my cane. I'll go, Russo said immediately. I'll get your wife and your gear sergeant major. Marcus finally relaxed his shoulders just a fraction. Thank you, Sergeant. As Russo hurried out and Evans slunk away to the locker room, Marcus stood alone in the center of the booking room. He was in pain. He was exhausted, but he was still standing. He had held the line. The fallout wasn't just a ripple, it was a tsunami. Marcus had been right about the video. Brenda the librarian hadn't just recorded the incident. She had uploaded it to social media before the police cruiser had even left the parking lot. By the time Marcus walked out of the precinct that evening, leaning on his retrieved cane and holding his wife's hand, the video had 3 million views. The title was Simple Cop Kicks Cane from Disabled Veteran. The internet did what the internet does best. It investigated. Within hours, Officer Derek Evans was identified. His high school yearbook photos were found. But more importantly, other stories began to surface. A Hispanic man who had been searched for drugs by Evans while changing a tire. A black teenager who had been tased for jaywalking. Marcus didn't speak to the press immediately. He went to a lawyer. He hired a specialist in civil rights litigation, a woman named Patricia Hill, who had a reputation for shredding qualified immunity defenses. They filed the lawsuit in federal court. Thorne versus the City of Fair Oaks et al. The complaint was a masterpiece of legal writing. It alleged unlawful seizure, false arrest, excessive force battery, and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The discovery phase was brutal for the city. Patricia Hill subpoenaed Evans' entire disciplinary file. It revealed a pattern that the department had ignored for years. Evans had a stop rate for minorities that was 4 times the department average. He had complaints of rudeness and aggression that had been dismissed as unfounded by his previous supervisors. But the smoking gun was the body camera footage. During the deposition, the city attorney played the video. It showed exactly what Marcus had said. Evans approached an old man standing still. Evans escalated. Evans kicked the cane. And the audio was damning. You want to play lawyer? Play lawyer in the cell? The city attorney paused the video. He looked at Marcus, who sat across the table in a suit that fit him perfectly, his Navy Cross lapel pin catching the light. Mr. Thorne, the city attorney said, sounding tired, we have no defense for this. The loitering charge is baseless as you were a customer. The intoxication claim is disproven by the breathalyzer we didn't even bother to administer because it was obvious you were sober. The force used was objectively unreasonable. I know, Marcus said. We want to settle, the attorney said. We don't want this going to a jury. A jury will give you the city. It's not about the money, Marcus said. It's about Officer Evans. I want him gone. I want his certification revoked so he can't just move 2 towns over and do this to someone else. And I want an admission of wrongdoing. We can terminate him, the attorney agreed. And we will report the termination to the state board for decertification. As for the settlement, he slid a piece of paper across the table. The settlement was finalized 3 months later. The city of Fair Oaks agreed to pay Marcus Thorne $1.2 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a single plaintiff in the city's history. Officer Derek Evans was fired. The union didn't even fight it. The public outcry was too loud and the video was too clear. The state revoked his peace officer certification. The last Marcus heard Evans was working for a landscaping company moving rocks, a job where he couldn't arrest anyone for standing still. But the story didn't end with a check. Marcus sat on his front porch on a warm Friday evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purples and oranges. His wife, Sarah, brought him a glass of iced tea and sat in the rocking chair next to him. "You okay, old man?" she asked softly. "I'm all right," Marcus said. He rubbed his left knee. The new prosthetic he had bought top of the line, paid for by the city, fit better than the old one ever had. "They deposited the check today," Sarah said. "Good." Marcus nodded. "Call the lawyers tomorrow. Tell them to start the fund." Marcus wasn't keeping the money. He and Sarah were comfortable. They had his pension, their savings, their paid-off house. He had decided to use the $1.2 million to establish the Veterans Legal Defense Initiative. It would provide free legal counsel to veterans who had been mistreated by police. It was his way of continuing the mission. He couldn't carry a rifle anymore, but he could carry a checkbook. He looked out at his lawn. An American flag hung from the pillar of the porch, waving gently in the breeze. For a few days after the arrest, Marcus had thought about taking it down. He had felt betrayed by the country he had bled for. He had felt like a stranger in his own uniform. But then he remembered Sergeant Russo. He remembered Brenda, the librarian who stood her ground. He remembered the thousands of strangers who had sent him letters of support. He realized that Officer Evans wasn't America. Evans was just a flaw in the system, a rust spot on the armor. America was the people who fought back. America was the ability to drag the truth into the light and force the system to correct itself. Marcus took a sip of tea. He watched the flag ripple. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just ready for the next watch. "You did good, Marcus," Sarah whispered, reaching over to hold his hand. "I just stood my ground," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all a man can do. Just stand his ground." The streetlights flickered on. The world kept turning. But in this little corner of it, justice had won. Not because it was given, but because it was demanded by a man who knew what he was worth. What do you think about the settlement? Was $1.2 million enough for the humiliation of a decorated hero, or should the officer have faced jail time? If you believe our veterans deserve better, and that bad cops need to be held accountable, drop a respect in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories that the mainstream media tries to ignore. See you in the next one.
Our review is now complete. For more unedited field recordings, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching Bodycam Incident Reports.